the retail revolution. We had prepared this deck for Mall of America, actually, who was here a couple weeks ago in a really interesting presentation. And we got through, in true kind of meeting fashion, got to like 12 of these. So I'm excited to kind of show it to you today. But we're going to take a look at really 3 things that are affecting retail in some way, shape, or form. Now, I built this in the kind of mindset of the Mall of America, big box retailer, as people start to evacuate ship a little bit. But for all the retail experts in here, take that with a grain of salt. It might not directly apply to all of your business situations, but no, that was kind of my hope when we did it. So I think we know retail is facing some issues today. Physical retail experiences are changing rapidly, but online experiences are continuing to erode. We know that. It's kind of scary, right? Traditional sales tactics are overlooked and outdone by competing experiences. So if you look at the Mall of America, they're not putting in a new Kohl's, they're not putting in a new JCPenney, they're putting in the go-kart alleys, they're putting in a new movie theater, they're putting in that kind of stuff. So we're looking at, we're not going to the mall, we're not going to retail just to hang out anymore. We have other things we can do, and people are following that trend. And ultimately, the physical retail experience is lacking innovation. It hasn't changed in 10, 15, 20 years drastically, and you're seeing that with big stores closing. But don't worry, here we are. Retail footprints can actually provide experiences that online platforms can't. There are things we can do in retail that you can't do on Amazon.com, which is really cool, right? These destination retailers can provide these personalized shopping experiences that these customer segments are demanding. So we can do things in a face-to-face interaction that you can't necessarily online. And then ultimately, advancements in technology are making innovation and change within physical retail space easy and accessible because it's not incredibly expensive, it's something we can do every day. And so we broke these down to 5 points of impact. I'll give Mr. Kimball a little shout out for the titles because I did not write them. We're going to look at the North Star in terms of Amazon, what's going on. We're going to look at this appetite for continuous connection, how we as advertisers can take advantage of emerging channels to create brand stories that never have to end. It's not just online, it's not just in the physical experience, right? And because of that, how are retailers using those channels to broadcast their messaging, can provide value throughout the entire day. Brand swagger acceleration. Who is excelling in this? Who is creating a new image for themselves as we continue to look to online, physical, and whatever is in between? And then ultimately, how are we creating these personalized experiences, not just online, but actually in physical retail and then those other touch points, which is really cool. All right, EdgeBot, if you guys want to whip out your phones, throughout the entire experience, you guys can text the keywords that I say to that number. It's going to pop you back a quick little link to download the application, get more information, watch a video, et cetera, et cetera. If you want to dive into that, it's kind of a fun little thing. So let's take a quick look at Amazon. I know all of us are pretty into Amazon, so I'll cruise through this. Online retailer top $500 billion by 2020, and ultimately a lot of that growth is due to Amazon.com, right? Because they are leading the way. And they're outpacing people like Walmart, right? And much of it is due to Prime. And Prime right now is seeing a 40% household penetration within the United States, which is pretty crazy. Why is that important? Well, 53% of all purchases on Amazon are done by Prime, and they spend a ton of money. 2.4 times percent the amount of money is spent on Amazon from Prime members versus not Prime members. And when you're a Prime member, you often don't go anywhere else. So you're not necessarily going to Jet.com, you're not necessarily going to Walmart.com, which is not the same thing, but you're very, very loyal to the Prime platform. And ultimately, Amazon is continuing to innovate within this space to create what we're going to continue to talk about is this frictionless retail experience. You're seeing it with their products, right? Amazon.com and the Amazon app are pretty stellar, and they still continue to be really awesome, and I think we all use them a lot. But you look at Prime and the subscribe and save option, you look at the dot buttons, which are really crazy. Now Prime now, even doing restaurant delivery, they're continuing to innovate beyond the physical screen, and we've talked about that a little bit. The 2-day Prime promise, right? They're trying to make sure that shipping is happening in 2 days or less, which in some cases isn't necessarily happening. They're starting to slip a little bit, right? And people are taking note. Walmart jumped in, free 2-day shipping from Walmart.com, and you don't need to pay a membership, which is pretty crazy to think about. And then they continue to spend a ton of money acquiring new companies. Walmart just bought Jet.com. If you're not on Jet.com, you should definitely jump on. You can text the keyword Jet to EdgeBot. You can jump back and jump on that. Jet is an Amazon competitor, as simple as that, right? There's a couple commercials running before that. And you're seeing players, if you saw my CES presentation, jump into the retail, which is now very ambiguous, right? The retail space, such as like Mercedes, they're trying to figure out how are we going to tackle shipping as we see more people going online, and you can dive in there. But Amazon's not done, right? You see that continuation of evolution of different products, right? And we talked about Alexa, right? Alexa's a huge deal, right? It's 11 million devices sold, 40 million expected audience by the end of 2017, which they're approaching really quickly. And ultimately it's because of the dot, which, as you know, was $40 over the holiday season. And you're seeing that open source platform now affect other retail platforms as well. So Amazon's Alexa, this is an Edge article we wrote, is actually built into the Starbucks application now. So using the power of AI that Amazon's created and made available to Starbucks, you're able to speak your order or text your order right to the Starbucks application and actually order, which is great. And they're continuing to spend a ton of money, right? So you look at the income versus revenue, Amazon's not making a ton of money. There's a huge gap here. You know why? Because they're spending it on this, which may sound really crazy, but they're looking at their drone delivery, and you're going to see a lot of things come from them, which is really crazy. Amazon, awesome. Continuous connection. We're moving on. A lot of you have seen me use this slide before. It's from Bud Cadell, a strategist, not friend, I would say, someone I look up to, right? This idea is today, thanks to the rise in connected devices, digital is a constant layer of our lives, and we use digital in a really kind of interesting sense around here. Digital is everything. So the interesting part now is we can reach people not just on like e-com and in-store, we can now as a brand have a part of their entire journey. And we can create value that never really has to end, which is really cool. And we've tried this here at Periscope. We've built this new touchscreen device that's for metro transit systems. How are we bringing brands to life within bus shelters in really interesting ways, adding value? And you're seeing that Paul talked about this last week. So we're looking at messaging platforms such as iMessage and Snapchat, and how retail is able to now interject themselves through the iMessaging application, so the new features in Snapchat, and adding value in those platforms as well. Chatbots, we talked about it last week as well. We're able to create these one-to-one human experiences throughout, whether it's SMS or iMessages, that are these powered brand experiences that are adding value to people, not necessarily on e-commerce, not necessarily in the actual retail environment, but when you're sitting in front of the bus, when you're sitting in class, when you're sitting here listening to me talk, you're able to be chatting with Macy's right now and figuring out what are you going to buy tonight, what are you going to wear this weekend. Macy's is adding value on a channel throughout your entire day. Now these are powered by something called AI. We talked about AI a little bit with Alexa, but the idea is that millennials right now, we're believing that AI is actually able to predict better what I want than necessarily a human, and you're seeing major companies invest in that, right? So you look at the Alexa platform, we look at Apple Siri, we look at IBM Watson, and we also look at Microsoft's Cortana. All of them are fueling, right, the AI revolution, which is really cool. And we're seeing that happen here. So now, here at Periscope, we can build bots in under 24 hours, which is really cool. So we're working on stuff for United Healthcare right now. We were also looking at some stuff for Woodford, but we can find ways to meet people where they are. Paul did a great job messaging that last week, right? Now we look at how this layer of kind of tech can bring retail beyond e-com, beyond actual physical retail experience. And we've been doing it a ton with payments for a while, right? So we've all used Apple Pay before. We've all used the Apple in-store experience where you're actually able to pay via your phone without ever talking to a specialist at Apple Retail. And ultimately, that's been going on for a long time, right? So we've been able to do that kind of payment. But recently, we're seeing a huge evolution in the peer-to-peer world, right? So you look at the Venmo, you look at the different things that Paul mentioned last week. And so at some point in time, we're going to be able to continue to kind of revolutionize commerce in the same type of way. We did this actual application in partnership with a Canadian company. So James Newman actually did the UX for this, and we partnered with them a couple months ago. But this was an idea where we were actually able to use the same technology that they use in the Apple stores for any store, no matter the size, right? So you go down to like Wilson & Willie's down in Washington. This tech would be able to overlay their e-commerce so that I would be able to walk into Wilson & Willie's, buy a really, really expensive dog leash, and be able to pay for it using Apple Pay on my device and walk out without ever having to talk to them. Now this type of stuff is open to any size retailer, so we're not necessarily just looking at big box stores able to take advantage of that tech. Continuous frictionless experience is really cool. Now because of this constant layer that retailers are able to be a part of this consumer journey, we're benefiting as advertisers, we're benefiting as companies. It's not just the consumer that's benefiting from that. We're able to collect immense amounts of data about what people are actually doing, right? And we're seeing that through this, what we built here with this video analytics, right? We're able to watch these physical retail experiences and figure out where are people hanging out, what aisles are they in, how long are they sitting in front of an end cap. And that data is incredibly important for a lot of different things, right? How we're building new products, how we're laying out our stores, how we're placing things. We're able to do that here in Periscope today, which is really cool. Continuous connectivity. Retail ambiguity. How are retailers continuing to take advantage of that? We talked about our retailers here. We're talking about bridging that gap, right? So we're no longer looking at just e-commerce. We're no longer looking at just physical retail world. We're looking at bringing the two together. And you look at techs like NFC, right? Where we're able to bring that digital layer to life within the physical retail experience so that they're benefiting each other, which is really cool. and you look at the sneakers. So if we downloaded this, I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, this actually is an application done by Nike, and this is not just some e-com app, right? You don't just go on here and buy your shoes. What this is actually able to do is it's able to mimic the retail experience, giving you a really incredible kind of online type of browsing, so you can look and explore and kind of dive into the shoes that you might want to buy, also while executing the purchase as well. You can download sneakers, SNKRS. So you're looking at this idea. We talk about omni-channel a lot, and I think we all kind of have to be experts in how are we reading people at every single channel that they're in. But ultimately, we're looking more at omni-experience, right? How are we bringing the experience of these retailers to life in the platforms where all of our consumers are? And whether that's on a dedicated application, whether that's on Snapchat, whether that's in a physical retail store, we're trying to figure out a way to bring that value to life from the retail perspective. This is a really interesting thing. It's called Dreamscape. It came out a couple weeks ago. But they're talking about how are we using, in this case, a really flashy term, VR, to completely build an augmented retail experience for someone within this environment. They're actually building this in a mall, right? So we're not necessarily just saying, hey, this is going to be something you do in your living room or whatever. This is going to be an actual public kind of peer-to-peer type thing. So you and your buddies can go on, slap on some goggles, and actually experience a retail environment that's completely customized for you. And I'll cruise through these next slides, but like Macy's is doing some really incredible things within their retail experience that is bringing in like the Watson chatbot to be able to help you actually navigate their store. And Tony Smith actually experienced that the other day. Home Depot is doing some really interesting things to bridge their e-com and actual physical experiences by creating every single one of their stores is actually now a distribution center, right? So you're able to get your products in under 2 days. The inventory is pretty incredible, and it's always just down the street for you. And then, I don't know if you've noticed this, but Google's actually doing a really interesting thing. You notice these aren't just from retailers. Google's doing a really interesting thing where you're actually able to see live traffic data within physical like restaurants or retail experiences they're using. Everyone's got Google Maps on their phone. They know here within this room we have 60 people. They know that. And they're able to deliver that value to the rest of the world as we kind of go and say, hey, how busy really is Macy's at the Mall of America? How really busy is Barney down the street? Google's able to give us an accurate result. So that's how these retailers are taking advantage of some of these channels, which I think is interesting. We'll cruise through this. We've got 2 more. New forms of connection create brand wow. Another Mr. Kimball line here. But how are retailers truly taking advantage? How are they kind of blossoming? And how are retailers transforming themselves actually as companies because of these new channels that they're able to be on? And you look at this idea that ultimately these customers are expecting us to know both e-com and physical store experiences. We're able to do that, and ultimately they're just throwing money at tech. It's my favorite dancing robot. But this idea, technology continues to fuel the rapid change of experiences, and you see people doing that, right? You see 60% of retailers investing heavily into technology that's actually enhancing their in-store work. And you see that through like Nike, right? The Soho concept store, you've probably seen a few versions of this, but in Soho, Nike built this incredible retail experience where it's not focused on the product, it's actually focused on the actual showrooming of the experience that you're going to use the product in, right? So instead of just looking at a bunch of shoes, they built you a basketball court to try the shoes on, play one-on-one basketball with a buddy you had, to actually physically try on the actual product you may buy, which is cool. All, of course, integrated with Nike Plus. So we know people are throwing money at this physical retail world, but it's an interesting point. If technology is not coupled with an enhanced, more complete, and satisfying customer experience, the dollar spent might as well be thrown out the window, right? So we can't just throw tech or money at tech for tech's sake. And I think we've seen disconnects with that when we all of a sudden throw out this idea of, oh, we'll throw some smart mirrors in there and we'll do this beacon thing. And there are places and times for that across the board, and I don't want to diminish that. But I think it's important to keep this idea of the holistic consumer experience, remember, not just offline and online, but the entire journey, to figure out where are consumers now and how, as a retailer, can we meet them there to add value and not just throw money at tech. So Chipotle did a really interesting thing. They invested a ton of money into figuring out what the actual music was in their store. Now, could they built an app? And yes, they have an app, sure. Could they thrown a bunch of money at their in-store signage that's digital TVs? Sure. But what they did is they realized how important the music was. It set the tone. So they're able actually to invest a ton of money into the idea of this person who handpicks the music to create that really type of Chipotle experience. So we come on to our final section about personalization. I think we've all seen personalization before, but we talk about tech, we talk about being a part of this complete journey. But the idea is we now have the power to personalize every single retail experience for every single customer. And whether that's in a physical retail space, online. I think online was the easy part of this, right? We used to be able, and we still do, we do our best to customize online experiences based on past shopper history, we do it past browsing data, but we're able to actually now customize in store as well, which is really important. So this idea of having a singular vision of consumers online in the actual physical experience is really important as we begin to know this person not necessarily just on our e-com platform, but actually in the store. And we look at not necessarily as B2B, B2C, but this idea of human to human. And it's this idea that that actual physical retail employee or that actual retail space can truly know what this person is looking for and truly know what they might like to see in front of them. And when we look at this, it's not necessarily just digital, mobile, or in store, it's truly everywhere. So we need to know them on every single place that we touch them. Once again, it goes to this whole channel, like how are we delivering them value on, let's say, iMessage, if that's what they'd like to actually live on. I compare it to ad blockers, right? Ad blockers, ooh, evil. But when I used to do this kind of digital presentation on ad blockers, it's this idea that content is constantly coming at the people we're trying to reach. Same now with experiences, right? So the competing experience side of things, there are competing experiences left and right. And this idea that we tend to block them out, right? There are a lot of things competing for our attention. But it's this idea of personalization through this kind of customer-first model where we're able to actually break through that barrier and add actual value to the consumers, which is really cool. So we did an interesting thing with beacons in retail, and I'll just talk about it for 2 seconds. And there's a demo across the street at P2. But what we were able to actually do is, beacon technology is nothing new. What beacons are, they're just little chips that we place around retail environments, and then we put corresponding chips actually within the products that are sitting on the shelf. The idea would be that the system is constantly tracking what products are being interacted with. So let's say we're at Red Wing Shoe. You have a bunch of boots sitting out here, you have your kind of fashion-forward boots, and then you have your work boots. The system's actually going to know what customer is picking up the work boots, and then can augment the entire retail experience based on what boots are actually being interacted with. So if I pick up a work boot, maybe all the digital displays around me go into the steel toe technology and how this is the most rugged boot for the job. And then I put that down and I go pick up the fashion boot, and all of a sudden now the entire store will transform into more a fashion-focused type of environment. Now this is not something that's far off in the future, that's something we're able to do actually today. And that's just one example of how we're able to personalize the retail environment based on some tech help and based on knowing our customer in a really different way. Some other brands are doing some really interesting things. I'm going to be short on time, but brands like Perch are doing some awesome things by arming their actual retail staff. And then Sprucebot, which I talked about at the CES presentation, is bringing the CRM data to life within the physical retail experience through Wi-Fi. So based on the Wi-Fi that's streaming out of our phones, our retail employees are able to know who's actually in the physical retail store and pull up their actual profile from our customer relationship management software. So me as an employee will say, hey, I know that's Bruce, and Bruce likes music, and Bruce likes tech, and now I'm able to actually help Bruce out in a different type of mindset. And it's a product that's actually out for small business from Sprucebot, and there's actually a Cox product that does that really well for more of our enterprise-grade level clients, which is really cool. And then here and now is a concept product that's basically very similar to the Apple EarPods, right? Put it in, and it's actually analyzing what the customer is saying in real time to deliver relevant information to the employee's ear, such as stock information, color choice, all that kind of stuff, depending on the experience that you're in, to deliver that kind of personalized human-to-human type of interaction. So that's personal retail. Whew. There's a lot of words. All right, in summary, here we are. The digital and physical worlds are becoming one, right? We know that we don't necessarily, I've said this a million times, we don't necessarily just have e-com, we don't necessarily just have physical experiences. We've continually created this layer of value that now retailers are able to come to life through. Now that layer is different for every one of our consumers, and that's why it's so important for us as advertisers to be experts in all of the channels. Now, most of those channels tend to be digital, right? Other channels are not. But it's important that we're experts in all of these so we can truly meet consumers where they are to provide this brand value, in this case for retail, which is really interesting. So key takeaways, if you're going to leave here, Amazon has the numbers, we know that, but it can't always compete. We can't just look at Amazon and say, oh, we're dead. There are things we can do as retailers that Amazon cannot. There are ways retailers can connect with customers, and those ways continue to evolve. By taking advantage of these, we never have to stop the communication we have. Because of these always-on nature of these connections, right? We can always bring value. They're always on. They're always a layer of our customers' lives. We should be using these to expand and augment the retail experience. So that's not necessarily just on e-com, not necessarily just in retail. We can bring the retail experience to them. They can purchase sneakers through the sneakers app while they're sitting on the bus, right? Brick and mortar continues to deliver the experience customers demand. To win, retailers must focus on the experience they can offer. Brick and mortar is something that we can't look over. There's things that can come to life in brick and mortar that can't through Amazon. Now, Amazon's building brick and mortar, which is an interesting topic to talk about, but there are things that brick and mortar stores can do that online cannot. And then finally, as we continue to fight for attention, that ad blocker visual I gave you, it's this idea that each visit must be personalized in order to add value. We must break through the clutter and add that one-on-one, human-to-human interaction that we actually can now through these new types of technology to deliver that value that the consumers are truly, truly fighting for. So, there was a ton of examples in here. There were a ton of case studies that are all really, really packed full of things. So I'd encourage you guys can use these slides as much as you'd like for anything that you might feel is interesting, and dive in. So like I flew over that Perch example. Perch is an incredible retailer that's doing some really interesting things to arm their retail staff to give that personalized type of connection to their customers. So edge.periscope.com. The full PDF of this is going to be posted at 9:30 today, along with a copy of the live stream. Jump on there, download it, use it, ask questions. We're always happy to dive further into any of these points or add some clarification. I apologize, I cruised through some of this. Truly, this should be about an hour-long presentation, as you probably could see. But ultimately, it's all available on Edge. So, a couple things that are changing in retail. I hope you guys found some sort of value in my rambling. There are some really direct things that we can do as advertisers today. The stuff we talked about here is not necessarily the future. It's not 2018. We can deploy those beacons today. We can build chatbots today. We can meet customers in evolving channels today. We can evolve the e-commerce type of experience today. Those are things that we can do, and we would love to help you make that happen for our clients and your business, and et cetera, et cetera. So, Retail Revolution, thanks guys for coming to Public House, much appreciated.